Today is Friday. It is Chof Daled Cheshvan. We are in Teres Menachem Sefer Mamar Vayedaber in the Mamar of the second day of Shavuos. Anochi. We are on page Kuf Ayin Daled at the top. Or actually Kuf Ayin Gimel at the bottom. Where did we leave off? We'll start from the last line on Kuf Ayin Gimel. Okay. So the Rebbe over here is discussing Demim Tzemech Chayim Medaber, the silent, the vegetable, the animal, and the human, the four categories in creation. He discussed it as it's in the world. He discussed it as it is in man. And he discussed the level of Dibur, Medaber, in Torah. And now in chapter 6, Ois Vov, he is talking about he explained the idea of Pamalya Shel Maila and Pamalya Shel Mata. You make peace in the heavenly entourage and the earthly entourage through studying Torah Lishma, studying Torah for the sake of Torah, with the right approach, with the right intent. And he explained that the heavenly entourage is Atzilus, the earthly entourage is Bri, Yetzirah, and Asiya, Biyah, because Atzilus is still in the domain of the Creator, and Bri, Yetzirah, Asiya is already the domain of Creator. That's why Atzilus is called Pamalya Shel Maila, the heavenly entourage, related to the Creator, and Pamalya Shel Mata, the earthly entourage, is related to the created. And in both those levels, there's a need to make peace, because there's something lacking there, and the Dibur HaTorah, studying Torah specifically through Dibur, through speech, through verbalizing it, that draws down that element that's lacking in both of those dimensions. Now the Rebbe
Did he explain what is lacking in Atzilus?
Yes, he explained that. We learned that in the previous Shiur. And in this section, we'll start actually from the second section in Ois Vov, Kuf Ayin Gimel, 4 lines to the bottom, the paragraph Va'inyan. Now the Rebbe explains this in Avodah, in Avodah, in the man's service of Hashem, as it reflects in the soul. He quoted previously the pasuk Na'asa Adam B'Tzalmeinu Kidmusenu. When Hashem came to create man, he said, let us make man in our image and in our
Form.
Form
And image.
how did we define it? Image and likeness. Have a look. Yeah. In our image and after our likeness. B'Tzalmeinu is in our image. Dumusenu is likeness. Image meaning something that is very similar or very much alike to the one in whose image it is. And likeness means it's similar. So those are the two levels he said earlier. Tzalmeinu in the worlds, in the realms, is Atzilus. Dumusenu is Biyah. Now that I've explained this, how it is in the Neshama. The idea of this in man's service of Hashem, when we say in our image and in our form, in this verse, it's a reference in the soul, it refers to the godly soul and to the animal soul. The nefesh elikisu b'chinas tzelem, the godly soul, is the aspect, the idea of tzelem, image, because tzelem is made up of 3 letters, sadik, lamed, and mem. And as explained earlier, the Alter Rebbe brings in Likutei Torah that tzelem refers to the 9 spheres from Chochmah through to Yesod, right? Why is it 9? Why is it 90? Because it's each one of the spheres are multiplied by 10, because each one is made up like Chochmah Sheba Chochmah, Bina Sheba Chochmah, and so on and so forth, until you come to Yesod, and the final one is Malchus Sheba Yesod. So you basically have 9 times 10, which equals 90. So that's the tzaddik. The Lamed, he says, is a reference to the Koiches Makifin, the more transcendent aspects of the soul generally refer to the moichin, to the intellect of the soul, or the inner dimension of the intellect of the soul, which is more esoteric, more removed from the operative faculties of the soul. And there are three moichin: chokhmah, bina, and das, also multiplied by 10 because it's made up of the other 10 spheres as well. Chokhmah shebechokhmah, bina shebechokhmah, etc. Chesed shebechokhmah, so on and so forth. So that's 3 times 10 is 30. And what's the mem? The mem is a reference to those. He doesn't bring it here, but the Alter Rebbe over there on the Kotel says that the mem is keser chokhmah bina das. So it's different juxtapositions of the forces of the soul. Keser chokhmah bina das being even more makif, as it calls it there, makif la makif. It's even more transcendent. So keser chokhmah bina das is 4 again, made up of 10. So 4 times 10 is 40. So that spells the word tzelem. So he says shatzadik made al keches pinimim. The tzaddik, the letter tzaddik from the word tzelem, this points to the internal faculties of the soul. The lamed mem made al keches makifim. He bunches them together here. The lamed and the mem are a reference to the more transcendent aspects of the soul, as just explained. So therefore, tzelem is a reference to the godly soul. The nefesh habami so beginners mus, and the animal soul is the aspect of dmus, like likeness. And both of these souls, so he mentioned before that this saying, what the Gemara says, the Talmud says in Sanhedrin, that if you occupy yourself with learning Torah, lishma, for the sake of studying Torah, with the proper approach or the proper intent, we make peace in the heavenly entourage and the earthly entourage. So in the previous section of the chapter, he discussed that this refers to Atzilus and Biyah, right? Here he's saying that in the souls as well, you have Maila and Mata. The godly soul is Maila, is the heavenly aspect, and the Mata, the earthly aspect, is the animal soul. And in both these souls, Tzarich Li'is and Nashalom, we have to introduce the idea of peace, meaning to say there's something lacking in each of these souls, which through studying Torah we bring peace to it, meaning we fill that which is lacking. This is the idea of making peace in the heavenly entourage as it is in the soul. It's the idea of drawing down into the godly soul that which it's lacking. Making peace in the earthly soul, the is the idea of drawing down into the animal soul what it is lacking. In more detail says the Rebbe, bringing peace into the godly soul is as follows. So before we say it, before we actually learn it inside, I just want to say, I want to elaborate on this. It'll be easier to follow. In the morning brachas we say Elakai neshama shenasata bi tehirahi ato berosa ato yitzarto ato nafachta bi v'ato meshamra bekirbi. God, the soul that you've given into me, is pure. You created it, you formed it, you made it, you blew it into me, and you guard it within me. So it enumerates 5 levels. Tahirahi, pure, Berosa Yitzarta Nefachta, and Meshamra. So Chassidus explains that Berosa Yitzarta Nefachta is a reference to the 3 levels. The soul is made up of 5 levels. There are 5 levels. Chamisha Shemes Nikrula, it says. The soul has 5 names. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. In ascending order. Nefesh being the lowest aspect of the soul. Ruach being the second one. And Neshama being even higher. Chaya, Yechida is even higher, and Yechida is the highest. Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama are the aspects of the soul, the internal aspects of the soul. The immanent aspects of the soul, the parts of the soul that clothe themselves within the pnimius, in an inner way, in the person's body. Chaya Yechida are the transcendent ones. So without getting lost in these dimensions too much, so again it corresponds to the Olamis, to the realms. So the Nefachta aspect of the soul is the lowest one. That's the Asiya of the soul, the active aspect of the soul. Ruach is Yitzira, corresponds to the Elam Yitzira. Nefesh corresponds to Bria. Chaya corresponds to Atzilus. And Yechida is the Eir, which is before the Eir in Sof, which is before the beginning of from where the Kav, the line of godly energy that Hashem drew into the Tzimtzum, when He made as explained, the Arizal says that when Hashem created the world, when He decided to create the world, before He created the world, the Ein Sof, Hashem's infinite light, which is completely limitless, filled the whole hollow. And then, for the purposes of creation, He tzimtzum atzme, He pushed away, so to speak, Kaviyochel, the godly limitless energy to the sides, and He left a hollow l'makom pani, so to speak, notionally, metaphorically. He left a hollow, an empty space, and in there He drew a kav, a line of godliness, which is from the Ein Sof Shalifnei Tzimtzum, from the godly limitless energy from before the contraction, right? And that kav is basically stretches from that point all the way through the entire Seder Shtalshalos, the entire chain order of creation. So far as the neshama is concerned, so basically from the kav and on are basically all the levels that we know that are in Seder Shtalshalos, within the chain order of creation. The Ein Sof Shalifnei Tzimtzum, the godly energy that's before the contraction, is the limitless the godly energy. In the soul, that corresponds to Yechida. So in short, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama are the Keiches Pnimiyim, are the aspects of the soul that are not the Keiches, the aspects of the soul that are immanent, the Keiches Pnimiyim, the internal aspects of the soul that clothe themselves internally and fuse with the body, whereas Chaya and Yechida are the transcendent aspects. And that corresponds to Neshama Shenasata be Teherahi, which is Chaya. Ata Berosati Yitzata Nefachta is Neshama Ruach and Nefesh. V'ata Meshamar Bekirbi is Yechida. Right? Yechida being the very highest one. And why is it called Meshamar Bekirbi? Because it's explained in other places in Chassidus, because the Yechida aspect of the soul is that which guards. It's like the Ein Sof Shalifnei Tzimtzum. It's that circle, that transcendent aspect that holds all the revelations of the soul together. That's in brief. Says the Rebbe like this, so even though the godly soul, for although the godly soul is at the level of Tahirahi, which is what? As just explained. That is the idea of the Chaya aspect of the soul, and even as the soul comes down into the levels of Berosa Yitzata Nefachta, meaning Neshama, Ruach, and Nefesh, Yesh Bo Bechinas Tahirahi, it still retains the aspect of Tahira from the Chaya. In other words, there's no detachment from the lower levels of the soul to the Chaya, to the transcendent aspects. Even though that part of the soul does not manifest itself internally in the body, but that link remains. So even at the lower levels, the link with the level of Chaya, the transcendent aspect of the soul remains. Via Seidim is and even more. Sheyesh Bo Bechinas Vata Meshamar Bekirbi. It also has within it all the levels of the soul. The level of Ata Meshamar Bekirbi, as just explained, that's the Yechida aspect of the soul, the very highest aspect of the soul, which is even beyond the level of Tahira, which is Chaya. Right? And that's why this is the reason why we say, the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, that the soul of a Jew remains true to Hashem at all times. A Jew cannot detach himself from Hashem under any circumstance. As far as a person, God forbid, can fall in the active aspects of his soul, the soul remains attached to Hashem and can never be detached from Hashem. Why? That is because of the Tahiri, the Yechida aspect of the soul, the essential aspect of the soul. So if that's the case, what could the soul possibly be lacking? If the soul is always attached to Hashem. And that, the essence of the soul, the Yechida aspect of the soul, is always attached to Hashem. And that Pinteliyid, so to speak, that essential point of the person's soul remains intact and connected to all the other aspects of the soul. So what could it possibly be lacking? Why do we have to make peace in the heavenly entourage? We just said that making peace in the heavenly entourage, which is the Nefesh Elokis, the godly soul, is because it's lacking something. What could it be lacking? Mikol Mokim, says the Rebbe, nonetheless, because the soul becomes in the mode of a created thing, meaning to say that even though the soul is godly, but for the purpose of the soul coming and fusing with the body, it goes through a process whereby it becomes in the mode of a created being. If it retains its godly aspect, but in the mode of a created being. If it would remain in the mode of how it is before it comes into the body, which means it's godly. In other words, it's within the domain of the Creator. The person would never feel detached from Hashem. It would be impossible for the person to feel his own self-identity, the fact that he exists, and the concealment and the challenges that we face in terms of our Avodas Hashem would be non-existent. We would be exactly as the soul is above. So for the purpose of the soul coming into the body and it becoming, it allowing the possibility of feeling itself as an independent entity, that's called the soul becoming in the mode of a nivra, of a created being. So because of this aspect, particularly as a result of it clothing itself in the physical body and the animal soul, there is, we could associate to it the idea of a lacking in its light, in the soul's light as it is before it comes into the body, before it becomes into the mode of a created being. How is it possible for the animal soul to sin? How is it possible for a person to sin? If the godly soul is attached to Hashem all the time, and the soul before it comes into the body, and even after it comes into the body, it remains, its frame of reality is godliness, how does it allow the animal soul to sin? How could the animal soul sin? If the godly soul is present in the body as well, how could the animal soul cause the person to, or be activated to sin, to do something which is against Hashem's will? The godly soul is impossible for it to go against Hashem's will, right? And so if it's in the body, it should not allow for anything that is against Hashem's will to actually transpire.
If it was the same as before it was created.
If it's the same as before it came into the body, or before it became in the mode of a created entity, so to speak. Says the Rebbe, the idea of the animal soul being able to sin is because there's a diminishing, something lacking in the light of the godly soul relative to the way it was before it came into the body, before it clothed itself in the animal soul, before it was turned into the mode of a created entity. What's this lacking? The fact that it goes through this process to become in the mode of a created being, meaning to say that it now has the consciousness also that there's something else there other than Hashem. There's the body there that it has to come into. There is the animal soul in which it has to clothe itself. That's a diminishing. That's somewhat of a diminishing in relation to how it was before it came down, before it went through this process. Godliness is total wholesomeness. There's nothing lacking at all. So the way the soul is before Hashem turns it into a created entity, so to speak, before Hashem sends it down into the body to clothe itself in the body of the animal soul, it's part of godliness to such an extent that it's completely wholesome. Once it goes through this process, there is that diminishing. That's why we need to make peace in the godly soul, meaning to say Hainu, to bring into the godly soul that what it is lacking as a result of going through this process. Hainu, to draw down into the soul the way it is down here, to draw down into it the essence of the soul, as it is rooted in the very essence of Hashem. So in other words, before the soul is turned into Bechinas Nivra, before the soul is sent down into the body, into the animal soul, as it is rooted in the very essence of Hashem, it's Shlemus HaDekela, it's total Elikus. Once it goes through this process, there is a diminishing of that. So now, in the state of the godly soul, as it is drawn down into the body and having gone through this process to make it fit to animate and to be clothed in the body of the person and in the animal soul, in that reality, to draw down how it is originally in its as it's rooted in the very essence of Hashem, so that down here it is now as it was up there. So that's the piece that we need to make in the godly soul. That's what the godly soul is lacking. In the next section, the Rebbe is going to explain what piece we need to make in the animal soul. What is the animal soul lacking for which we need to make peace, and what do we need to fill? More about that, the Mitzvah on Sunday.